Chicago meeting. So, it's really great to see everybody here, and notice that this amazing team of activists, of which you all are a part, have been working really hard to continue to grow our membership and activities. And because of that, we are in the new space that we are in because we need a new, bigger space to see 200 plus people for our monthly meetings. So there's a lot of smaller places and not that many bigger places, so please let us know if you have any connections at possible locations not too far away, and just let us know. So everybody has the opportunity to get this great handout, take it home with you. It was put together by much of the talent in this room, and I'm just going to hit the highlights, but you have it, and if you don't have it, get it when you leave, and also it's all mostly on our website. But you got this. So we have postcard parties, November 13th at Hop District Brewery in LaGrange Park. This is in the evening at 7. They are so fun, and it's for Tennessee in a special congressional election on December 2nd. So quick turnaround, great time to see people. We've been having amazing bridge brigades, which is also sometimes called expressway expressions. And they're going to be at 10 a.m. Saturday the 15th of November, 3 p.m. the 19th, 10 a.m. Saturday. So 3 more upcoming opportunities for those bridge brigades where they put out these amazing signs. We're going to there's ICE protests going on outside of AT&T stores, and we have one in LaGrange. So that will be on Sunday, November 16th, because I think many of you know about AT&T's communication systems are being used to target, detain, and disappear people. So if you're unhappy about that, you can go to that. There is a wonderful concert for Music for Democracy coming up Wednesday, November 19th in Roberts Westside in Forest Park. If you haven't been there, it's a great venue, really close. And this is a concert to benefit PASO, or PASO, a group that helps and empowers local immigrant communities. It's going to be great. There's going to be music, inspiring words, and you can see Diane, Joe, and Claudia. Wave at us, Diane, Joe, and Claudia. They're in the back, ready to tell you about it and get flyers and more information. So if you're interested, sign up soon, because seating will be limited, and it is a very cool place to know about. December 10th, social gathering, just social, 7 p.m. Wednesday, December 10th at Imperial Oak in Brookfield. They have always been so friendly to our causes, all kinds of causes around town. We're going to be taking a collection for 2 worthy programs at the social, Beds Plus, and the Student Support Fund at Morton East High School in Cicero. You may know that the town of Cicero has been very much under attack. The families, and particularly those kids in those high schools, need our support. Other than that, we just need donations to help cover room rental, because we weren't expecting to have so many people. And so we did pay for the room, so the donations can help us go towards that and the other things that we do. So thank you for listening so well, and we're going to have a short video from Indivisible National. Ezra Klein, one of the founders of Indivisible National, and maybe Leah Greenfield, his wife, is also on this. So we're going to have that, and then the meeting will get started. Thank you.
Hey, Indivisible West Suburban Chicago. I wish I could be there in person. We just came off a big meeting with Indivisible group leaders all around the country talking about the primaries coming up. And you all are on the front lines of this fight in more ways than one. Look, the regime is targeting you all. I see the pictures, I see the videos, I read the stories. You know it, you see it with your own eyes. This is your life right now. And I just can't express how thankful I am to you all for organizing to push back against the regime and organizing to push for a Democratic Party that fights back as well. We don't have to have this party that just surrenders in the face of the opposition. We actually can build a party that fights back. And that means organizing and demanding it. That's the opportunity in front of us. As frustrated as I am right now with current Democratic leadership, I'm talking to Indivisible group leaders and voters all around the country. And rank and file Dems and Democratic establishment leaders, they couldn't be further apart right now. And that's an opportunity. That means that we can actually demand a better party in the primaries to come. We are going to rally around whoever wins. Win or lose these primaries, we're going to rally around whoever wins. We're going to stop the fascists in the midterms. That's the plan. But the primaries are the opportunity for us to demand better. It's where we get to choose the leaders who are going to direct the Democratic Party, both in their policy platform in the future, but more importantly, right now, in their orientation to an authoritarian regime that is invading our states, occupying our cities, terrorizing our communities. We can have rollover and play dead Democrats, we can have establishment-aligned Democrats, or we can have Democrats who fight back. And I think rank and file Democrats all around the country want to see their leaders fight back right now. I believe that's where the party is going. But we've got to organize to achieve that vision. And you all are doing this, and I so appreciate it. It's important for your community right now, but I hope you know it's important far beyond Chicago. People are seeing this, people are watching this around the country. You are producing a game plan for the rest of the country, and we're learning, we're watching, we're hoping to create something similar in other parts of the country. So please keep organizing. It's valuable, it's important, we see it, and we're with you in spirit, if not physically there, and hopefully we can join together in the not too distant future and fight this fight, link in arms together. Keep up the great work. See you next time.
Look at you all. This is like more than double our previous high crowd, so thank you all for being here. I'm Mike Waters.
I'm Abby McEntee.
We are co-leads for the election team at Indivisible West Suburban Chicago. We're here today to talk about the midterm elections, which probably will be, well, certainly one of the most important non-presidential elections in a long time, as we try to take back control of the House and Senate and derail the dangerous Trump regime. So we had some encouraging signs last week. There were off-year elections in a few states, and they turned out very well for us. Democrats easily won the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey. In New Jersey, the Democratic candidate, the polls had showed that being a pretty close race, and she won by 14 points. In New York, Mondami beat the big money interest and the retread Andrew Cuomo by 9 points. In California, Prop 50, which allows the state to redraw congressional districts, won by a 2-to-1 margin. In Pennsylvania, all 3 Democrats running for re-election to the Supreme Court won their seats. In Georgia, Democrats unseated 2 longtime Republican incumbents on the state's Public Service Commission, and while it's not a high-profile board, it sends a message. And in deep red Mississippi, Democrats flipped 2 Republican-held Senate seats and 1 Republican-held House seat. So first question.
We've got some panelists for you all today, and we asked them to be here today to lend their expertise. We're going to ask them in just a moment to give us their thoughts on what just happened a couple of weeks ago. So I'd like to introduce them before we do that. First, we have Patrick Watson. Patrick grew up in Naperville. He holds a master's in public policy from the University of Chicago and has worked for nearly 20 years on political campaigns and for not-for-profit organizations promoting equity and fairness, working on presidential, congressional, state, and local campaigns and initiatives. And Patrick currently serves on the Indivisible Illinois Executive Board, where he co-chairs voter engagement and communications. Thanks for being here, Patrick. Next to Patrick, we have Terrie Pickerill, a Democratic political strategist and co-founder and managing partner of SnyderPickerill Media Group. It's a Chicago-based media firm specializing in political television advertising for state and national political campaigns and candidates. She also serves as president for the Illinois Women's Institute for Leadership Training Academy. And Terrie and I used to work together. I reported to Terrie when we worked at AKP&D Media, that's David Axelrod's firm, and we worked on media campaigns for candidates like Tammy Duckworth and Barack Obama. Thanks for being here, Terrie. Kathy Cortez has served on the League of Women Voters of Illinois' Board of Directors since 2023. She is chairperson of the Issues and Advocacy Committee and the Volunteer Lobby Corps. She has served as issue specialist for fair and affordable housing since 2020. Kathy joined the league in 2019 as a member of Palatine, where she is a current voter registrar and former local league president and chair of candidate forums. Thanks so much for being here, Kathy. And with that, do y'all have thoughts on what just happened in our elections?
There we go. Well, I was very excited, like everybody else in this room. I'm confident about what happened last week. I do think the lesson that we can learn from this past election was that the economy and affordability is what is on every voter's mind, and they're sick of the Trump administration and their policies that are making it even less affordable to live here. So I think that to me is what we should take forward. And now with healthcare continuing to be unaffordable, that will be an issue that we'll be able to talk about next year and hopefully finally fix it, because it is outrageous how our healthcare system is. That's my thought.
Is this on? Okay. I would agree that definitely it was a good bellwether for us for the midterm elections. The American people are tired of the rising costs that people are suffering, the layoffs that people have seen across the country in every sector, whether it's the federal government or companies that are laying off, especially coming towards the holiday season. And I think that we have to mention what people are seeing in their communities and what they're seeing on TV. The American people are not for people being snatched off the street. This isn't Nazi Germany in the 1930s, and no matter what side of the aisle people are on, people are very dissatisfied with what they're seeing out of this administration with the Border Patrol and ICE.
Thanks. As the League of Women Voters, probably perhaps the one of a few nonpartisan people in this meeting this evening, one of the things that excites me about the upcoming election is that the last 9 months or so has been a real lesson, I think, to every American as to what a slippery slope denying rights and denying rule of law can be for a democracy. And for me, that's really an eye-opener, and I hope it's an eye-opener for every single legitimate and registered voter. And if you're not registered, see us at the back. But to me, that's the main message that we're taking away, is that this should be an active election with lots of people showing up, because they understand now in a really tangible way what's at stake. And also the fact that they might want to consider voting for candidates whose main mission is not to exact violence on our neighbors and hunger on our poor, among other what I would call potential government offenses that we seem to be seeing right now. And so I think the motivation will be there. I think that's really exciting, and whether or not the elections we just saw are a bellwether, I believe that more and more people will show up and start to take action on the things that are important to them.
So before we get to the November midterms, we actually, for the first time in quite a while, have several interesting primary races here in the area. With Dick Durbin retiring, the U.S. Senate seat is open. Yeah, I knew that was coming. So 12 candidates have filed in the Democratic primary. The biggest names for that are Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, Congresswoman Robin Kelly, and Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. So that means Krishnamurthy's congressional seat in the northwest suburbs is open, as is Kelly's 2nd district seat on the south side and south suburbs. A slew of candidates have filed in those two races. There's also a boatload of candidates in Jan Schakowsky's district, the 9th district on the North Shore. She's retiring. Closer to here, the 4th district seat, that's Chuy Garcia, is open, with his surprise announcement after filing had closed that he was retiring. Who's are in order? He is not seeking re-election. His chief of staff, Patty Garcia, no relation, filed her candidacy at the last minute in what was one of those politically orchestrated moves that we all hate. She is so far unopposed, although there has been some talk of an independent running. In the 7th District, Andy Davis is retiring. There are 13 candidates who have filed in the Democratic primary. They include State Rep. Sean Ford, who has been endorsed by Davis, community organizer Keena Collins, the mayor of Forest Park, a union leader, the Chicago City Treasurer, a former Cook County Commissioner, and a big bucks real estate guy who's already got like $1 million in the bank. So, and in the 6th District, that's Sean Casten's district, he has a primary challenger from a bright and energetic political novice who some of us have met, Joey Ruzovich. So we know there are going to be some new faces from Illinois in Washington. And so this sets us up for the next part of the discussion about what is the outlook for the 2026 elections. What are the key races? And what's the outlook for progressives as we try to win back control of either the House or the Senate? Terrie, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so let's start by talking about the House of Representatives. I'm sure you guys all know that we need to net 4 seats to take back the House, which is not a lot considering in 2018, when Trump was president the last time, we netted 40 seats. We had a lot further to go, but at that time. But that, to me, is a good sign. This cycle, we also know that the Republicans, because when they can't win fair, they do it unfairly, and they've decided to remap many districts, which I'm all for with California, but less so with Texas. But they have 9 districts across Texas, Missouri, and North Carolina that they've drawn so far, and Democrats have drawn 5 so far. None of these have, well, Texas might be in effect, but a lot of them are going to have court, go to the courts before they become effective, except for California. And Missouri, right now, it's in the courts. They are talking about a ballot initiative, which will postpone those seats from taking effect next year. So really the battlefield is kind of up in the air. But I would caution both parties that, you know, when you take a firmly Democratic seat or a Republican seat and you make it a swing district, which is what you're doing because you're taking some Democrats out of it or some Republicans out of it, you know, you're taking a 1-mile flood barrier that's 20 feet high and then turning it into a 10-mile flood barrier that's 2 feet high. And when we have that Democratic wave, let's pick up some of those Texas seats. You know? But the converse could be true, and Republicans could pick up some seats in California. So I personally don't love the idea of the redistricting, but here we are. We have to live in the reality we're in. But that does cause a lot of uncertainty with the House and what's going to happen. I'm very optimistic that we'll take it back. The DCCC, which is the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, is targeting around 35 seats across the country, and they target the ones with the Cook Partisan Voter Index, which is the PVI of like R plus 0.02 to R plus 27. So the PVI is based on the last 2 presidential elections, how many Republicans voted and how many Democrats voted in those districts, based on the national nation as a whole compared to that. So an R plus 27 is very Republican. And I think that's kind of, you know, tilting at windmills, but you know, you never know, you can catch lightning in a bottle. So the districts that I think are most likely in play if we don't have a significant blue wave are Iowa 1, that's an R plus 0.02, Colorado 8, which is R plus 0.08, Nebraska 2, which is an open seat. Kamala won that by 4 points. But they are talking about redistricting, and so we'll see. PA 7, that was held by a Democrat for a really long time, and then she lost last cycle by just a little bit. I think we can take that one back. PA 10 is pretty close to being taken back. Arizona 1, the congressman there is a Republican, and he's running for governor, so it's an open seat. Open seats are always good. New York 17, Wisconsin 3, these Texas seats we talked about. So those are just a few seats that I think we have a real shot in, and we only need 4 of them. But then we have to hold serve in the other seats, the seats that we have already. And you know, Maine's second, I'm sure you guys have heard about Congressman Golden. He has decided not to run. He won when Trump won his district by 10 points, and he won in 24 as well as a Democrat. But I don't think he was very specific for that district. I don't know that we'll get somebody that can win that again, but we'll see. And we have to hold Ohio and other seats. So with all that, I still am very optimistic that we'll take the House back. And the Senate, we also need 4 seats to net 4 seats. But it's a much different map. And the Senate's much, much harder this cycle. We have to defend 3 or 4 competitive states where we have Democrats, including Georgia. But with the election last week and winning the lower level statewide in Georgia, that makes me more optimistic. Michigan is open, which, you know, like I said, the open seat in the House in Arizona was good because it's open, but it's, you know, also good for Republicans. So I think we can hold Michigan, but we'll have to see who gets out of that primary. New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, and Sununu is running, and he's very popular. And then we need to pick up 4 seats after holding those seats. And the states are just not great for the additional 4 seats. North Carolina, I think we have a really good shot at. The governor, Roy Cooper, is running there, former governor is running there, and he's really popular. So, and he's a Democrat, so that would be great. Maine is one of the states that they're talking about with Senator Collins. I think she's very popular. I find it hard to believe that she would lose, but you never know. Ohio it has been trending away from us, but Sherrod Brown, there was a recent poll that showed that he has a razor thin lead, which is great. Alaska, Texas, Florida, you know, Iowa, those states are not great for us, especially Texas and Florida. I think Florida's just, I've worked there for 15 years, the last 15 years, and it's every year trends against us, and it's almost a lost cause, which is unfortunate. So that's kind of my overview of what I think, where I see the battlefield for next cycle. Illinois, thankfully, is very blue. So once we win these primaries, we have our people, so for the most part. So yeah, that's what my thoughts on that. Do you guys have any extra additional thoughts? Okay, all right.
Thanks, Terry. So another big issue in this election is going to be voter suppression attempts, states across the country and nationally, and election integrity. So we asked Kathy from the League of Women Voters to kick us off on that subject.
Thank you. I decided to expand from voter suppression to basically anything that challenges a voter's ability to choose representatives who go to our government to work in our interests. And so kind of put it into 5 basic categories: voter registration challenges, voting barriers sort of at the poll places and things like that, manipulation and disenfranchisement, voter intimidation, and disinformation. So let's go ahead and start with voter registration. There's a lot going on in voter registration that we need to be really diligent about. I'm not sure where the government is going by asking all the states to send them their voter rolls. There is a likelihood that they could be using it to purge voter rolls, and so we need to be really diligent about monitoring how they're using any information that they can legally get from us for that purpose. So that's something that we should all be keeping our eye on. But there are layers and layers and layers of challenges that have been made to voter registration, and most of those fall under the burdensome requirements for citizenship identification. We had an executive order back in March, basically saying that if you're using the federal voter registration form, you would need to submit citizenship with that, proof of citizenship with that. That challenge, that executive order was challenged and is not in effect. We also had federal legislation. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act is a piece of legislation through Congress that requires proof of citizenship, but the manner in which it is being required is overly burdensome, generally affects the poor, their ability to get the documents and get out to vote, women who, like me, changed my name when I got married, so my birth certificate isn't my name anymore, the disabled who can't get out in person, and all kinds of other folks like the military and everybody else who's going to have a challenge getting there. So this is another thing, it has not gotten through the Senate yet, but we need to keep an eye on when this comes up because it absolutely must be voted down. The one that I found most interesting, and by the way, there are lots of states that are also doing some sort of citizen identification requirements, and for the most part, they're being challenged under the Voting Rights Act, and so the National Voting Rights Act, and they haven't quite made their way through. I doubt if we will see it in Illinois, but we need to be really diligent about making sure that nothing like that rears its ugly head here. But the one that I found most fascinating, I'm sure you're aware that when laws get made in Congress, the nits and nats don't get worked out in the Congress, they get worked out in the administrative, right? So if some sort of a climate change law goes in, EPA is the one that decides what the appropriate level of emissions is or something that needs to be in the law, right? Congress doesn't necessarily do those nits and nats. An organization called America First Legal Foundation petitioned the Election Assistance Commission of the United States to put into the Federal Register a change requiring citizenship identification. So no vote needs to be done in any of the legislative bodies in order to do that. There was an open comment period. I think over 150,000 people or so did get out there and reply. But those are the kinds of things we need to keep our eye on to make sure that some of these changes are not happening under the radar. That closed, that open comment period closed last month, but those are the kinds of things where if you want to get activated in those, I'll share some information with you a little bit later on how to make sure that you know what's going on so that you can personally take action to make sure that our government's working for us when it comes to voting and not against us. The other big one is purging of voter rolls. And we've had a couple of lawsuits that have popped up around the country there. One of them really revolved around the Republican National Committee challenging whether the state of Michigan was sufficiently managing its voter rolls and properly maintaining them. It was found that the effort they were doing was a good faith effort, and so the purging that organization requested was denied in the courts. All good stuff. In Georgia, there's actually a law where citizens can challenge voters. So an individual came up, he had hundreds of people who said, oh, this person I think is dead, this person doesn't live here anymore, I think you need to get all this stuff taken care of. The good news is that his request was made within 90 days of the election, and according to the National Voting Rights Act, it was not legal to do purging of voter rolls. And so that case also was dropped. But those are the kinds of things, as I pointed out, what's going on with asking for our voting records and things like that. Purging our voter rolls is nothing more than a way to diminish the voice of the people who are electing our officials, and in some ways it's targeting individuals. One of the things we want to be really careful about is the use it or lose it laws. That's the one where you lived in the same house for 20 years, you've been registered to vote there for 20 years, but you haven't voted in the last 2 elections because you don't like anybody that's running. Since you haven't voted, you automatically get dropped. That can't happen here in Illinois, and we need to be really diligent to make sure that if those laws show up, we have a way to counteract them. So the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was actual barriers to voting itself. And oftentimes these are targeted toward voters of color. They might be targeted to the political party that's in the minority, wherever the situation is happening, low-income voters, voters without access to transportation. So think about voting, areas for voting where maybe they take 10 polling places and condense them down to 5 so that it's really inconvenient to get there. Think about having mail-in voting because the state demands it, but you maybe put up one box someplace where people can't really get to it as a drop box for convenience. So the things that are being done to make voting harder and more inconvenient and targeting very specific parts of the population that they know are going to have a hard time with it. And often, I mean, and I hate to really speak to motives here because I don't know what the motives are, but when targeting the poor and the disadvantaged seem to be the outcome of what you're doing, something smells funny. And so we need to protect every voter, regardless of their economic status, their race, their gender, or anything else. If they're a US citizen and they're eligible to vote, they ought to be on the rosters and they ought to have a way to do it conveniently. The other things that, in terms of barriers to voting, that we're seeing are crazy things. I don't think we'll see this in Illinois, but you'll see it pop up in the news. Criminalizing voter assists. Now, boy, if it's a hot day and somebody needs some water, you can get arrested for giving somebody a bottle of water while they're standing in line. Dropping off a mail-in ballot for your disabled or elderly neighbor, right, is often not allowed in some states. Maybe helping a native English speaker with their ballot. In Illinois, that's perfectly legit. You just have to know what to do when you get to the polling place if you're doing that in person. So there are a lot of really insidious ways to keep people from voting. I don't know why we're trying to keep people from voting, because you can't control who's voting. But in some ways, the ways that these laws are being implemented seem very targeted. And so we want to be aware of what's going on there. The next section is manipulation and disenfranchisement. And there are a couple of really interesting things going on right now. I think the biggest example here is gerrymandering. I think we're all aware of the death spiral of midterm redistricting that's happening across our country. I'm starting to see signs of life from some of the legislators in those states that they're not going to go along with it, that they feel that it's not a good idea and not an act of integrity to rig the vote. But there's plenty of gerrymandering stories to go around in every state and in both sides of the aisle. And I think that this is one of those poisons that we need to get out of our system. So we need to be really diligent about what do we do after this 2026 election to make sure that something like this cannot happen again. That may have to happen at the federal level, who knows, but we definitely want to make sure that when this is over, however it ends, we get some legislation out there to make sure that it can't happen anymore. There are two cases that came up. I'm going to try to get through these really quickly. But in 2024, Rucho versus Common Cause was the case where the Supreme Court basically said, you know what? Partisan gerrymandering is kind of outside of our jurisdiction. That needs to be legislated by either Congress or your states. So, oops, I guess if that's what somebody did, then, too bad, so sad, that's what you got to live with. What's complicating things after that ruling is a case that was just heard by the Supreme Court last month, Louisiana versus Calais. That's coming up as a racial redistricting issue. But there are two things happening there. You probably all recall that the Supreme Court decided that you can't use race to admit kids to college anymore, right? So race is becoming, race under like an EEOC thing is kind of becoming an issue in terms of how we do things. So race is the question that's being asked here because Louisiana kind of carved up a couple of black districts, and so they're saying, well, this is the way we want to redistrict, and they're challenging whether race should still be a component, even though it's part of the Voting Rights Act that was fought very hard for, as I'm sure you all know from your history lessons. But what's going to happen here, and it'll be really interesting to see how the courts play this out, what's going to happen here is that even if it's racially motivated, all they have to do is say, it's a district that votes whatever. I'm guessing it's a Democrat area. So that's a voting district that votes for Democrats. We're just carving it up so Republicans can get in there. And that's okay. So these are the slippery slopes that we get on, and we have to be really careful as we're seeing all of these things play out that we weren't expecting to play out in our elections. We have to pay close attention and then get some policy in place at both the state and the federal level to stop this stuff. Last two are pretty short. I think you're probably pretty well in tune to these, and again, I'll get through them as quickly as I can. Voter intimidation is another way to keep people from voting. People don't like to show up to a place where they're exercising their civil rights and their citizens' rights, where there's armed guards monitoring the election. I don't know what that means. Are they monitoring to see how I'm voting? Are they monitoring to see if I stuck 2 ballots in instead of 1? I mean, I don't know what monitoring means, but if you need to be there in fatigues, something's wrong. That's a threat, and it's an implied threat, and it will keep people away. The other thing, and this was really more something that came up in the election, just happened recently. No public official should threaten voters that they are going to withhold funds for services if they don't like how you voted. That ought to be per se illegal, and when this is all said and done, we need to make sure that it is. These are the kinds of things that we need to be fighting for out there. We need to make sure this kind of stuff stops happening in our country. And last but certainly not least, disinformation, which I will just shorten to a much easier word, which is basically lies. Falls under the category of losing faith in what's going on, or being so misled that you're forced to vote, not forced to vote, but you're compelled to vote in a direction that might not otherwise be normal for you. Questioning the legitimacy of election outcomes is flat out lies and manipulation of the voting public, and it needs to stop. That goes to voting machines, people that are counting ballots, whether mail-in ballots have more fraud in them, whatever we've got going on in the background that's a lie, needs to stop. We need to somehow find a way to instill faith back in our elections. Shouldn't be lying about candidates either, whether that's on social media or otherwise. In creating, as I said, confusion and mistrust of voting systems and methods. It's especially we had some lawsuits over the election systems that were used in the prior election. These kinds of things all destroy voters' ability to do the simple thing, which in our democracy says you just go out and pick people who you want to represent you represent your interest in Congress, right, or in your legislature. So we need to stop these things. So I have been asked to say, what can we do? But I will save that for comments after Terrie and Patrick have had a chance to chime in here if you want me to.
So I know you're nonpartisan, so you can't say what you were hinting at, that all of these efforts are basically targeted at likely Democratic voters, right? And I know because you're nonpartisan, Kathy, you can't say that, but that's the case, isn't it?
Yes, that is the case. And by the way, our elections would be so perfect and beautiful and never, fake at all if Donald Trump won every fucking election. So, when he wins, for some reason there's nothing wrong. Anyway.
Should we be concerned that the Dominion voting systems has been purchased by a former Republican election official?
Well, I hate to be the person that's like, yes, because you're like, you shouldn't say that. But I do worry about that. I don't have any backing for it, but I don't know, what do you guys think?
More so than that, the specifics of that case, I think that anybody that's developing a system, it's used by Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike, or for that matter, if you're libertarian or green or whatever your flavor is, right? It ought to, by definition, be required to not be partisan. And the fact that it's being made into a partisan event, it's alarming. And so I don't have any reason to believe that there'll be any shenanigans. I like to think that every shenanigans, yeah, it's my favorite word, that people are of good faith, right? But it's hard to stomach with some of the other stuff you see going on. And so I see where the suspicion is there, but I don't have any reason to believe that there is malintent there.
I have less, I believe there's malintent, but anyway.
So, which brings us to you all, us all, what we can do. And so we've asked Patrick to talk a little bit about what Indivisible Illinois has planned, a little bit about what we can do. Are there any races of particular interest in Illinois that you guys are focusing on? How involved do you plan to be, does Indivisible plan to be in contested primary elections?
So first and foremost, thank all of you for being here. We win when we organize together. In this room, it's amazing. I see 200 plus people out here who came out on a cold night to get involved. So thank you all for being here. Before I get into exactly what we can do, I want to talk about where we are right now and what's at stake. So I think you all have seen what happened with the government shutdown, and we had a number of senators that folded. They let us down. One of them was our own state senator, Senator Durbin. Senator Tammy Duckworth, she held the line. So we should absolutely thank her. We are encouraging all of you and all Indivisibles and everyone across the state to call both of their offices, to call Senator Duckworth's office as well as Senator Durbin's office. First, to thank Senator Duckworth, who actually used a number of the SNAP programs in her life. She used food stamps and had government assistance in her life. And then we have Senator Durbin, who folded. We need to call his office, even though he is retiring, and let him know that we're not satisfied with his position, with being one of the senators that folded. That leads us into what Indivisible is doing at a national level. Indivisible is looking at primaries in 2026 and supporting candidates that hold the line and that are strongly for protecting the American people. So you can find out information about that on Indivisible's website. There are going to be primaries, and Indivisible will be actively engaged and endorsing in these key primaries. We're going to be backing and supporting people that have our backs, and those that don't, those that want to stand for the status quo, we're not going to be supporting them. We will be supporting candidates against them. So you can find that information on the Indivisible national site. That's going to be a big part of what Indivisible is doing as we head into 2026. I want to talk with you all about the Trump administration and what they're doing, who they're targeting right now, and why we need to be very, very concerned with that. I know most of us aren't on X. We aren't looking at X. We aren't looking at the videos on X or Instagram or some of these other sites. But there are very key targeted advertisements and videos that are coming from official government pages, whether that's the White House account, whether that's the Department of Homeland Security, ICE accounts. They're just specifically targeting young men, millennials, and older Generation Z. That are specifically targeting them specifically. They're using pop culture music, they're using Call of Duty video game style ads to recruit for ICE, to show that there's this bravado, this alpha male culture within the administration. And it's working, it's working. It's pulling younger males into the Republican Party and into Trump. Even on the campuses, we are seeing Turning Points chapters that are opening up all across the country. Even my own former college, I'm seeing a Turning Points chapter that just started there, and this is a college that had never been very political. There's a chapter starting on that campus. So we need to be aware of this as a party, and we need to be aware of this as Indivisible. I want you all to look around the room right now. I don't see very many young men in the room. I also don't see a lot of minorities in the room. This is a hole within the party. It's a hole within our activist organizations. And it's something that we have to address, and we have to make sure that our messaging is reaching them with issues that they are concerned with, and that we make sure that we see faces that look like these people in rooms and on panels, and the messaging is first and front and center. I think that's going to be very important as we head into the elections, because this is going to be a long-term battle. Republicans seem to always plan 10, 20 years ahead, and we tend to be more reactionary. So we need to be very, very well aware of this. We've also seen everything that we're seeing around immigration. And we're lucky that we live here in Illinois, where we have the Trust Act and we had SALT legislation that just passed that's protecting our immigrant communities. We've seen Trump threaten to pull the National Guard into Illinois, but we've also seen the unhinged behavior of Border Patrol. There's a reason that this is happening. There's a reason that they are unhinged, that they're throwing flashbangs and tear gas and things in neighborhoods. They want a reaction from us. They absolutely want a reaction. Trump wants to bring the National Guard into Democratic cities to show that they're out of control, because this will help them in the midterm elections again. They're showing that Democrats and democratically run cities are out of control, and that the National Guard is coming in and it's reducing crime. So we want to be very careful when we are attending any of these protests, or we have people that are going on at these protests. We want to calm things down. We want to make sure that the tensions aren't as high at these various events. I do believe that there are some agent provocateurs at some of these events, maybe at Broadview and other places, that are intentionally doing things to make it seem out of control. But we want to be very intentional when we are attending these protests, as most of us have been with the No Kings events and other events, that they are staying under control. Something else that we can do is we can push our local governments. So whether that's our local municipalities or local counties or local townships, to make sure that they are not allowing ICE or the Border Patrol to use government property, whether that's county property, whether that is municipal property, for staging. Most of the surrounding counties and cities have done this, but there are a few that haven't. You know, DuPage County, for example, they put out a resolution. They didn't put out anything strong. At the state level they have, but at the local level they have not, and that's something that we all need to look at our various municipalities as well as our counties and make sure that they are putting these strong ordinances and bills in place to make sure that we are protecting our immigrant communities, and people see that we as activist organizations and Democrats are supporting their communities. Indivisible also is going to be doing a national boycott surrounding support of the Trump administration, support for ICE and DEI for a few large corporations. You'll be seeing information coming out very soon about this around Black Friday. One of those companies is Target. And Target has been on the radar for many people for quite some time with their elimination of DEI, also support for the Trump administration and ICE. Home Depot is another one of those organizations, and also Amazon. So you'll find out more details about that. We'll be emailing out information about that as well so that you can participate in that. I know you all are doing ICE Watch trainings. That's fantastic. Continue to do those into the community. We want to record anything that we are seeing, because they won't always be in control, and when we're seeing them doing things that are a clear violation of the Constitution, we want to hold them accountable when they're no longer in power. So continue to do that. We want to continue working with organizations like the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights and others that are directly helping immigrant communities. We also want to be there supporting organizations that are supporting minority communities or others that are under attack, whether they're transgender communities, LGBT communities, continuing in that support. This goes a long way, and the reason that I'm bringing these up, we have to make sure that other people are seeing that we are concerned about them. Because that's one of the issues. People don't see their issues at the front and center. They may not have seen them at the No Kings events and other events, and they feel as though the Democratic Party and the progressive movement, it's not for them. That's something that I'm hearing a lot. They're not concerned about our issues, so why should we get involved? Which leads us to candidates that are running for office in the upcoming election. We need to make sure that every candidate that is running for office, that we're asking them these questions. We're asking them, what will you do when in office about ICE and immigration? What will you do about DEI? What are you going to do about the attacks on civil liberties? These need to be the questions that we ask them of anyone that's running for office, and support those that are supporting us and supporting these communities. So that's going to be first and foremost. Any of our candidate forums that are coming up, any candidate forums that you have coming up, You need to be asking these candidates this. When they come to meet you, they're all going to come to try to get your votes. Ask them these questions. These questions are going to be very important as we go forward. We talked a bit about the Cook report and some of the districts that are going to be coming up. We're concerned with those districts. We're going to be doing phone banking into many of those districts. There are quite a few districts across the country that we know are in the toss-up category. There's some that are leaning Republican. Those leaning Republican districts, based on everything that's happening, what we saw in the past national elections, we know that some of those districts are going to be at play. We saw a very similar thing around 2018 and other elections when Trump was first elected. We saw a big wave, a shift. So we definitely want to make sure that we are making phone calls into those districts. We also have a couple of districts here in Illinois that we are watching. One of those districts, people say may not be winnable, but it's one that we are targeting, and we're going to be sending canvassers into that district, is the La Hood district. That is a district where we want to make sure that we're making calls into that district. We're going to be phone banking into that district. We're going to be canvassing into that district, so you all will get details on how you can join us for those canvasses in that district. I don't think that that district's not winnable. They said that the Illinois 6th Congressional District was unwinnable. They said that the 3rd Congressional District was unwinnable. The Marie Newman District and the Sean Casten District. They laughed at us when we first started organizing in those districts, but we knew those districts were flippable because we were on the ground and we were doing the work in those specific districts. So we want to do the same thing in the Hood District. So we'll have details of just how you can get involved with that. We're working with the local candidates that are running in that primary there. There are quite a few good candidates that are running in that district. We believe that that district is going to be viable in the upcoming election. It's something that's close to home. Also, the Senate, Michigan, obviously is somewhere where we're going to be spending a lot of time. We're going to be sending people into Michigan and other places just to make sure that we pick up as many seats as possible. So, at the local level, what can you do? It's very important that you get engaged locally. One of the ways that you can get engaged locally, or you can take ownership over your precinct. You can join with local party organizations and become a precinct committee person, a precinct captain, where you walk your community, building relationships with voters in your community, talking with them about candidates that are running for election. You can become the voice of truth in your community. You can also adopt other districts. This is something that we're going to take on as Indivisible Illinois. We're creating our own precinct captains program all across the state, where you can take ownership over your precinct in your neighborhood or in a district that's somewhere else in the state. We have parts of the state where they don't have the capacity that we do around the Chicagoland area, so we want to help them in some of these races, especially once we're past the primary and our races are a little safer. We want to make sure that we're going into some of these districts and making our state more solidly blue so that we can shift our focus to the battleground states. We want to focus on Wisconsin. We want to focus on Michigan, and we do that by making sure that our state is as safe as possible, by making sure that we're having those conversations early on with people. So you'll see a lot about our neighborhood canvas leader program. You can find that on our website and how to get engaged with that. So I definitely encourage you to become a PC with your local Democratic organization, as well as join us for our precinct captains program as well. We also have a voter protection program. We've done this for the past couple of years, where we watch precincts in the surrounding states as well as here in Illinois. I know people think that there is no voter suppression in Illinois, but there are definitely counties where there are shenanigans that happen across the board. We've seen ballots thrown out. We've seen polling locations that just mysteriously open late. We've seen places that may be in minority communities or near colleges where all the machines just happen to break around elections. We see this specifically around some of those municipal and township elections. So we tend to send people out to these locations to monitor. I know some of you have joined us for this poll watching that we do. We send people out all across the state to watch very key polling locations where we've heard of problems in the past. We're seeing a lot of this in some of the collar counties as well as some of the downstate areas as well. So that voter protection program, we're going to be kicking that off as we head into the general election. You'll hear more details about how you can get engaged with that as well. And it's something that we've done in coordination with a number of other groups across the state every election cycle. You also can join one of the Indivisible Illinois committees. We'd love to have you join an Indivisible Illinois committee. They help us to put together all of these various voter engagement initiatives, as well as communication, getting the message out all across the state about what all of the indivisible groups are doing across the state. We have 355 days until the election itself. It seems like a long time, but it's coming up faster than we can imagine. We've got a Democratic primary that's coming up very soon. We definitely need to watch all of the candidates and make sure that we are selecting the candidates that most reflect our values. So we're going to have a lot of candidate forums around that. I'm sure you all are going to be engaged with a lot of those candidate forums. You've attended a lot of those candidate forums, but we want to make sure we're asking those candidates the key questions, and then we're supporting candidates that support our values overall. So we're going to be sending out information about how you all can get engaged with all of those activities. That'll go out in an email blast. It's also on our website. So if you go to the Indivisible Illinois website, you can find out how to get engaged with a number of those initiatives. And we look forward to seeing you.
So we will follow up with information on how to get involved with the Indivisible Illinois efforts. We also are forming our own election team, Abby and I. We will be focusing to start on the March primaries and some of these local contested races that we talked about. We need help, we need your help. We're looking for people to research candidates, their stands on issues, their financing. We can show you how to do all that. And so if you're interested in being part of this effort, see Abby or me after the meeting. We're going to try to offer you all guidance on which candidates in the upcoming primaries are most supportive of our issues. And so we'd love to have your help. So,
All right, folks, so now it's your turn to pick the brains of these amazing panelists we've brought for you tonight. We are going to have a mic stand just over here. If you have a question for one of our panelists, come on up. We ask that you ask a question. We know we all have lots of great ideas, but we'd like to keep it to just questions for these folks. And then also, if your question has been asked, let's let that stand and we'll just move right along to the next question. And it looks we've got our first one. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Terrie Riley. I would like to know what we can do in the way of getting more people registered to vote, especially in like the lower income areas, the minority areas, and even in our areas where people are not registered yet. So what would you recommend we do? Thank you.
So there are a couple of things I would say. If you're looking for minority and lower income voters to register to vote, I would look at places where you may find a lot of people that move quite often. So I would look at apartment complexes and just randomly going and knocking on those apartment complexes to register people. I would also, if you're looking specifically for minority populations, I would look at places where within the community where you do see large numbers of minorities. I would start to register people there. I would set it up with local businesses, work with those local businesses. So whether it's a barber shop or a beauty shop, whether it's a black barber shop or a Latino barber shop, start to go there, build a relationship with the owner, start to register voters there in those locations, and look for various hotspots within those communities where you can register voters and build a sense of trust with influencers within that community, because people won't necessarily come and register with you if they don't trust you. So you want to build that level of trust within the community first with influencers, whether it's a business owner or a community advocate, and start to register voters that way.
You took the words right out of my mouth. Partnering with people in the community, with organizations in the community that have access to individuals that we don't have in our own circles is really the best way to do that, and have them orchestrate events for voter registration and things like that, because you're right, there is an element of trust and outsiderness, and I think that that's really, really great advice. The other thing I'll mention is that this last couple of months there were some hearings at the state level on whether we should have mandatory sort of compulsory voting requirements in the state. I don't know that that's necessary, but I do think that sort of a compulsory registration wouldn't be the worst thing, and you could opt out if you wanted to. And so if that's something that you think makes sense and you're interested in, by all means, when you're out there chatting with your state representatives, you might want to put the bug in their ear to see if they're interested in getting some legislation to do that.
Hello, my name is Patrick Comer. I don't know, thank you for being here, by the way. I don't know if I'm going to be able to express this very well, but I find a growing frustration in the things that I see on television and other places and the things that I read in newspapers, etc., where there is no specific action taken for accountability when people break the law. So, for example, in the newspaper, I may read something about ICE has taken a certain action and it's anti-constitutional. Or the chief, what's his name, Greg Bovino, shows up in court and the judge says, I know he lied. What's happening with stuff like that? People are showing up in federal courts, lawyers are showing up in district courts, circuit courts, and they're lying to judges. And it's shown to be untruth. Yet nothing seems to happen. What the heck is going on? That's what I want to know. That's my question.
Not only are they lying about it, they're making hype videos about it. I would highly recommend people to look on Instagram and TikTok and other places and just see the videos they're making about them breaking these rules, defying judges' orders. They're making hype videos about it and promoting it. So it's definitely something that we want to take note of. We want to record when they're doing these things. They won't always be in charge. When they're not in charge, we'll be able to hold them accountable.
And I will also say that the court system moves extremely slowly. I had a candidate, or somebody who was the state's attorney in Florida, in Tampa, and the Governor DeSantis removed him from office, and 2.5, 3 years later, it was unconstitutional. He could not remove it. He removed him because he was a Democrat. It was not allowed, and he never got put back in office. They had an election. The Republican ended up winning, and there was never any justice. So, yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Hi. You started to touch on a little bit of what I was going to ask. I'm a little bit concerned that we're still talking about, I might be wrong, so I apologize, phone banking, door-to-door is obviously important, we know that, but we're missing something if we're not using social media the way that our Republican counterparts are using it. You just said a couple of different times that they're getting the hype videos out. You remember everybody was like, be all you could be, remember that? Everybody wanted to join and get into the military, and those were the kind of things that were working. It's doing it again, but with using social media. We're not. Our Democratic Party is not using it, and I'm a little concerned about why we're not, and how do we counteract what's happening. Again, we're in reaction mode, which don't love, but why do we have to be in reaction mode? Why aren't we already out there? That's where the young people are. That's what's happening. They're, by the way, nobody's watching TV. Nobody's reading the newspaper. Nobody, except for this room. I do it.
There are some voters.
I do both. I do both. I'm sorry. I'm addicted to all of it, but I'm just saying, in general, that's not how people are digesting their news. They're not digesting their. I don't know how we could get another message out in a different platform.
Yeah, I think and I'll let you talk about this, but organic social media is what we need. And also like influencers. This past election, the Republicans really used influencers quite well, and the Democrats are just behind the 8 ball on that. So I totally agree with you, but I'll let you.
I agree. The influencers are very important. And again, it goes back to getting younger people engaged with the movement, whether it's our progressive organizations like Indivisible, whether it's the Democratic Party, and making sure that they have a space there. We don't have them there, they're not going to be able to post these things on social media and share it within their network. But it goes beyond social media. It's very targeted by the Trump administration. If you look at what he's doing, it's very intentional. It's those young males that he's targeting. I won't even say young, middle age at this point, between the ages of 50, and I would say all the way down to 20. You can use him going to football games, for example, and always being in the camera there, making sure that he's doing that. Also, going out to UFC events. I don't think people realize how much a part of millennial culture UFC is. He's out at those events every time. He's there with the administration. He's doing walkouts. He's making himself a part of these things where younger people are, video game culture. He's doing that so that he's there front and center, and he's bringing along his cabinet members as well. So it's something that we're going to have to counter. We need to make sure that we are reaching out to these influencers and that we are in those spaces as well.
So you guys agree, so do the party leaders agree? I mean, is there a recognition among Democratic Party leaders that they've been behind on this, and do we think that they will address that?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know the specific party leader, but I do think Democrats recognize that we're behind on all this. But it is a question of, like what Patrick said, we have to figure out, have these people available. We don't have like Donald Trump is the person, the president. We don't have that. Who's the person that's going to go to this UFC fights? Who's the leader of our party? And I think that's where we're lacking right now. Like, that's why we never know what the Democrats aren't doing anything. Why aren't they doing anything? And it's because we don't have anybody out there pushing that narrative. So, I think we have to fix that as well.
I would agree. There is a lack of leadership at this point. There is no clear leader of the party. We are a big tent party, and there's no clear direction nationally at this point. I will say that's been disappointing to me. I'm sure that's disappointing to you all as well. At the DNC level, we're not seeing a lot of activity.
Thank you. I also have a question about young voters or non-voters. You mentioned young men as being targeted by MAGA marketing. So for those young men and young women as well, how do you think that Democratic electeds and candidates are addressing their needs, especially the affordability?
I don't think they are. It's not front and center in the messaging, and that's part of the problem.
I'm going to disagree just a little bit. I do think that we won this past election because that was forefront. That was what they talked. It's what every candidate, from Mamdani to the two gubernatorial candidates to all the other candidates, that's what they were talking about, was affordability and how do we live right now when you can't afford healthcare, you can't afford food, to put food on the table. So I do think Democrats are talking about that, and I think it's going to be a big narrative next year. And how we solve the problem is a whole another thing. It's easier to campaign and than it is to actually govern. But I do think Democrats are talking about it. I just don't know if we have solutions necessarily.
Hi, my name's Tom. In answer to the one lady's question, street side protests by Indivisible, I think that really gets the message out to people as they drive by in their daily activities. My question, you mentioned, I was unaware that so many Democrats in the House in Illinois are not running for re-election. Are there one or two that are the most in danger of possibly flipping back red? And the other thing is my civics class is so far in my history that what's the federal government doing messing with election rules in the state of Illinois and other states around here? Isn't there a part of the Constitution that says the states dictate how their elections are run?
Yeah, that's a great question on the elections. What you're seeing happening is a movement toward trying to, what I'll coin as federalize the elections, so that the federal government should be able to tell you whether or not those voters are eligible, or federal government should decide whether you can use mail-in ballot as a secure vehicle for voting in federal elections, right? So far, the courts have held that this is up to the states, and that seems to be the story that they're sticking with. But it's really more of a movement, not because they think the federal government is entitled to do it, but more so because they would like to see it done, and they're trying to implement things that are moving in that direction.
By the way, they're the party of states' rights. It's like the Republicans claim to be states' rights until they're not. But I'll let you. I don't think any of the congressional districts, that off the top of my head, they're all going to stay blue, the ones with primaries. So no worries there.
The only district I would say that we need to make sure that we're bolstering up is Sorensen's district. It's an incumbent, but we need to make sure that we are supporting him in that district. We're supporting whoever the winner of that primary is. There is a primary. So it's the Rockford area, that area. And then it stretches down into Rock Island and I think over into a little bit above the Champaign area.
Hi, my name is Nina. I was wondering, since the Republicans seem to do anything Trump tells them to do, I was wondering if the release of the Epstein files, if you think the release of the Epstein files is going to change anything.
I mean, I would hope it would. Every day on my Facebook, I have hashtag pedophile in chief, but nobody seems to care. I think that we're just inundated with so much bad shit that he does every day that I think people are overwhelmed and they lose track of it all. And I would think being a pedophile would actually be something the American people would stand together against. But I think we knew this before he was elected, personally. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree. He famously said that he could shoot a man in the center of the street and get away with it, and he has. I mean, I want you to think about the Republican Party. This is the party of conspiracy theories, where we talked about state rights and federal overreach. Now we've got troops marching up and down the street. The very thing that they talked about on conspiracy, right-wing radio, black helicopters flying around, they're actually doing that in Chicago and LA and all of our blue cities across the country right now.
This is getting depressing, guys.
Hi there. I just want to know if you are on college campuses. Are there Indivisible chapters there, or are we actively going out there, kind of the antidote to Turning Point?
So we are actively looking to set up chapters on campuses. So that is something that we are planning across the state. So if you'd like to be a part of that, definitely go to our website and you can find out more about just our voter engagement committee and what we're doing on those campuses.
Hi guys, my name is Patty Lopez Gamboa, and I'm probably one of the few Latino minority who are considered. I wanted to share a little bit of what I've had to do to feed mis familias that are hiding and that are not coming out. There's pantries, but they're not coming out to pantries. And there's grocery stores, and they're doing free deliveries, but they don't have enough funds or money to pay for the groceries. So I own a property, a commercial property in Berwyn, and I converted my property into a nonprofit. So we bring them everything, essentials, food, love, and respect, every night to their homes. And I've gained trust of 300 families in 1 month, because I've been working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, and I've been building in more and more volunteers coming in to help me, and I was actually invited by Maria Hecker, she's somewhere in here. Anyhow, so where the minority vote, laundromats. I have the world's largest laundromat 2 doors down from my building, and I'm coming to them and I'm letting them know, because your US citizen child who could vote is coming out to pick up groceries if they can. And if they don't have a child that could vote or it's older enough, I bring them the groceries every night. And I've gone to Little Village. Sister is right next to me, but I've gone as far as Gage Park, as far as Albany Park. It's wherever the need, you know, and somebody reaches out to me, we're there to support the familias, because it's pretty bad. Just 2 days ago, I got a call from a 60-year-old woman at 10 p.m. and she said all she had was apples to eat. I've got a call from a gentleman that says, I take care of my household, it's 3 of them, but I also take care of my in-laws, and I cannot afford to take care of my own household, let alone my 80-year-old in-laws, and they had no food at their house. So if there's anything that I could do to get that vote, count on me.
Pat, you said your name was Patty? Hey, Lori, Julio, can you stand up? So we have an immigrant rights protection team here in our Indivisible group. It's got about 160 members, and we're looking for programs to support. Lori is the leader of that team. Can you two connect? And she can take some information on your initiative, and we will see what we can do to help you.
Also, please make sure that as you're seeing their children, their citizen children, voting age come in, give them the information they need. There's some cards or whatever back at the table where the league is there, with a QR code where they can get themselves registered to vote, and when you see them, encourage them to take that civic action that they need to take in order to help their families.
Hi, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to all the people that are here. My name is Jan, and I've heard a lot of talk about getting young people to vote, being on college campuses, social media, etc. What I haven't heard is the #1 issue that separates Democrats and abortion and Republicans, and that is pro-choice. Why isn't that hammered to young people? Young people are the ones that want choices in their lives. And I remember the dark days when there were no choices. I can't imagine an unwanted baby and what that does to your finances, to your food budget, to your housing budget, to your education plans. Why isn't that hammered home? It's such a big difference between the parties, and especially for people of childbearing years. And I'm talking about men too, because they have to pay.
I'm going to let these other two comment on the party politics behind that. But I think one of the things that is lost on young women is that they've never known a time, right? They don't understand the consequences yet. They don't understand the consequences and the responsibility of raising a family. And so these are things that I think as women, we need to start reaching out to younger women and help them understand those things so that they can get behind the rights that they should have in their reproductive health.
I think there's a disconnect between voters and what actually who they vote for. Missouri is a good example of that. They overwhelmingly voted for the abortion amendment last cycle, and also overwhelmingly voted for the Republican state legislature and governor that overturned that amendment. So it's like I don't think voters think as deeply about what's going on every day. Like, not to say that we're all great and everything like that, but like we think about it all the time, and we're very engaged, and that we are not the typical vote. No, most people don't pay attention. Of course, if the majority of people in this country are pro-choice. They want, the choice, but they don't vote like that because there's just this disconnect, and that's what we have to figure out how to put that together. And it's hard because then you have to explain how government works, and apparently we don't have the bill how a bill becomes a law anymore for children to watch because nobody knows anything anymore. So it is frustrating, and we do need to figure out that disconnect.
Hello. Well, about this last topic, so today I read that the Republicans in the Senate were trying to trade health care for pro-abortion actions, which is horrific. All right, now, and then that kind of leads into what I was going to bring up, which is response, Democrats responding to things. And this is something I've read a lot about, people being upset about. You know, of course, Republicans and or Trump get big play on the news when they come up with big statements. But there's never an organized Democratic response to that. Now, nationwide, people have suggested that it would be awfully nice if there was a response team in Washington that would get on the steps of the Capitol and say, by the way, when they said that, this is what this means, and this is, you know, what we think is a better way to go about that for the people. Which I think would be great, because there's never a response. Just one quick topic about that, Trump's 50-year mortgage idea. Right, I mean, he's never had one, so I don't know. But anyway, but you know, if they tried to promote that, wouldn't it be fun if automatically there had been a Democratic response to, yeah, let's look at that right away. Boom, here's some numbers. I looked at the numbers today and I laughed my head off, okay? You know, so that kind, and maybe we could do that in Illinois. Maybe Indivisible could think about that, doing that in Illinois, so that when something makes a headline, there's an immediate response, and then try to engage the media with it, of course, because Trump and the Republicans get immediate media response because of all the stuff going on with bribes and firing people for money and all that. Anyway, just a thought.
So Indivisible actually does have something called the Truth Brigade. The Truth Brigade focuses on rapid response to issues just like this. So that's something you can definitely get involved with. You can find out information about it on our website.
And I will also say that there's less press nowadays. There's less, you know, the press is owned by more Republicans and billionaires who don't want the truth out there. So I think it is, not to give the National Democrats a pass, but I do think it is tougher to get our message out, especially when we don't have one person in charge of that message.
Thanks for being here. Patrick, thanks for mentioning the Truth Brigade. I didn't know about that, and it might play into this topic. We're very blue already in this area, and I love what we do and all the volunteering, and I'm sometimes feeling like we're screaming into the void a little bit because there's nobody's mind to change necessarily near me. So I struggle with wanting to do something that would affect red areas more. And I struggle with the fact that there's a heritage foundation for the other side and those kind of organizations, and I don't see anything like that on our side, or the Democratic side. I shouldn't assume we're all Democrat. So what can we do to build that organization, to help fund it? I'd write a check today if I could figure out who would build something that does the coordination of, like what we're talking about, the lack of leadership, the lack of coordination, the lack of advertising, the lack of a cohesive message from the Dems that immediately counters all the long-term efforts that the Heritage Foundation or Project 2025 has been working on for decades. What do we do? How do we build that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, I agree. We need to, I mean, we do have organizations out there. We have independent expenditures that do things, but only usually during elections and around specific campaigns or ballot initiatives. But I agree, like, why aren't we every day, you know, on paid advertising, targeting the way that the Trump administration is using the White House, which is so illegal. Or, you know, doing TV ads, or because there are people that still watch TV. I do digital and TV, but there's still people that watch TV ads. But, you know, telling people what is happening, and we have all this money in politics and none of it's being spent on that. It's frustrating.
Part of it is we are a big tent party, so we have a lot of messages. It's much easier for them to have a message when they're a more simplistic party. They aren't exactly.
We're gonna wrap it up after these last few questions that are in line, so.
Hi guys, thank you for hosting all of this and everything. In my view, the Republicans have been cleaning the Democrats' clocks for the last 30 years, for the most part, because they rely on emotion. They appeal to people's emotions. people respond to emotions. They don't respond to the logical explanations that the Democrats have traditionally put out. Years ago, Michael Moore, the left-wing populist filmmaker, he had a discussion with Steve Bannon, who's right-wing populist goofball. Michael Moore asked him, he's like, why are you guys winning so much? And Steve Bannon said that, well, your side always goes for the pillow fight and my side goes for the headshot. And that's, ever since the Gingrich revolution in the mid-90s, that's really when I started paying attention. It's been one loss after another. The Supreme Court is gone after 30 years of the Democrats ceding ground, and the Republicans preying on emotion, and it's just the basis of emotions. The Democrats have to figure out a way to appeal to people's emotions. The logical explanations, while correct, they don't work. Like, they just don't work. People, to appeal to the masses, you need to appeal to the emotions. We need to make the arguments emotional and less logical, simple, like you were saying, but logical. I think, to me, that's kind of the key to all of that. In addition to the woman before me with the organizations on the left, that would be great too. But just from what I'm seeing, sitting on the outside, it's emotion. People respond to emotion. That's just the way we operate, and it's always going to override the logical brain. And the Democrats have to figure out a way to get their messages emotional.
Thanks. I would say on messaging, I do think that the Democrats and the Republicans, I think we use validators, we use emotion in advertising, maybe not so much in other ways that they speak to people, but I think where the Republicans, why they've done so well over 30 years, and we've had some bright spots. We've had Barack Obama, we've had some good times, but I think what they did over the 30 years was they focused on state legislatures, and they changed the map in every state, and it is so hard for us to win congressional races. Like, they were so smart 30 years ago or 40 years ago and said, you know what, we're gonna focus on this. Meanwhile, when I started in this industry 30 years ago, it was like, nobody wants to work for state house candidates. Oh, that's awful. Like, you're a bad consultant if you're working for a state house or state senate candidate. So no Democratic consultants would really work for them. And now it's like everyone works for them. But it was a misstep. It was a major misstep, because that's who writes the maps, rightly or wrongly. And probably wrongly, that's why we could make it more fair. And we've lost all these states because of it. And I think that is more at play than even what the message is that we've just lost the ability to even have districts that we can win in.
And I would say this goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about becoming precinct committee people within your community. Focusing on those local races is so key. Not only does that help us to build a bench of candidates that will run at a later point, but it helps us with maps when we're drawing maps. We're lucky that we live here in Illinois and we have control of the General Assembly, but there are many states where we don't have control of the General Assembly. In Florida and other states, Texas, we see what's happening in those states. We have to, at the national level, build up a strong PC program, because those are people that are going to be able to build those relationships in the community with people. They're going to be a trusted source of news.
Hi, thanks for putting this together this evening. It's been really informative. My name's Kelly, and I live in the west suburbs. I'm wondering what your thoughts might be around, like, I've been thinking here and there about, well, maybe I should, become more of an independent in the independent party. Is there any talk around another party that would rise up and have better leadership, since the Dems are so wishy-washy, at least at the leadership level?
I think it's really hard in our democracy to have a third party. It's very difficult. The two parties have made it very difficult to have a third party. I think, look, we have no power right now. We have zero. We don't have the House. We don't have the Senate. We don't have the presidency. We don't have a lot of the state legislatures. We don't have the governors. We don't have anything. So it's hard to say that. And I understand what you're saying, because the last vote really sucked. But you know, the Democratic Party is kind of, we need to rebuild it, is what needs to happen. Because it's not reasonable to think that we can, unfortunately, that we can have a third party, because they've just made the system to where we can't, in my opinion.
I agree. It's very easy to have multiple parties in a parliamentary system. It's very difficult in our system. My recommendation would be join the party and make the party. Express your beliefs, your feelings within the party. I want that to rise up within the party ranks.
Hello, my name is Susan, and I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of information. I don't necessarily have a question, because this has been awesome, but 5calls.org is, you can put it on your computer, you can put it on your phone, and it gives you a script of what to say to and who to call, and it dials the number for you, 5calls.org. Another thing about news, finding trusted news sources, is Ground News. It breaks everything down and like who's covering it and the factuality. It's freaking awesome. So please, Ground News and 5 calls. And the other thing, no, we don't have anybody, young men. My son would be here, who is of color, but he had another meeting. So I just want to tell you there is another influencer, and he's on Instagram. His name is Adam Mockler. Now, while he is white, he's a young kid who knows what the F is going on, and he says stuff. So follow Adam Mockler, and just keep doing what we're doing. So thank you.
Last question?
Thank you. I have looked at the two-party system, and I think if the mainstream Democrats kind of stop punishing progressives a little bit, unite to defeat Republicans, I mean really defeat them, because the mainstream Democrats are the new conservative, the progressives are the new Democrats, and the Republicans are the fascists. And if we take care of the fascists, then the Democrats can split and become a two-party system again.
Anyone have anything to add to that?
I think that spoke for itself.
So, a couple closing thoughts. It's been a heck of a week. We had some good with the results of the off-year elections last week. We had some bad with the Democrats caving on the government shutdown without getting the ACA subsidies extended. A couple silver linings in there maybe with the House back in session. That Arizona Democrat will be sworn in, I think has been sworn in.
All right, finally.
So hopefully that's the last signature needed on the discharge petition to force a vote. So hopefully we'll have a vote, at least in the House, on releasing the Epstein files. Even if it doesn't happen, it's a weapon that can be used against Republicans in the midterm. Another silver lining, maybe there's a vote on the ACA subsidy extension later this year, at least in the Senate. And if Republicans vote no, it's another weapon that could be used against them in the midterms. But one thing is certain though, our resistance movement is growing and it's working. The nationwide day of protest grew from 3 million in April, to 5 million in June, to 7 million in October. Take a look around you. Tonight's meeting, we double our previous high attendance. We had more than 3,000 people locally at the No Kings rally here in LaGrange in October. Trump's approval, Trump's approval rating is at the lowest at any point since this term. Republicans are starting to show at least a little bit of backbone. Senate Majority Leader refused Trump's demand to nuke the filibuster. Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, has emerged as a voice of reason in the Republican Party. So we're winning. It may not feel like it all the time, but we're winning. And Trump is panicking. And the more he panics, the stupider he gets. And the stupider he gets, the more shit we have to use against him in November. And one last thing that's good about all this is that it has brought together people of good conscience across the country. People in this room, people who are working together to fight for what is right and what is just, and that is all of you. So we are winning. We will win. It may not always feel like it, but we will win if we stay the course. We will prevail. And so I thank all of you for coming, and I urge you to go out there and make some good trouble. Thanks for coming.